Hello, this is Mary Lou Montgomery, doing business as Montgomery Historical Publications. I hear that you want to learn how to write a life story. I'm here today to tell you that if you have a notebook and an ink pen, you have all the tools you need. If you could meet one person from a previous era, who would it be? My first recommendation for helping individuals write their life story is to first ask them who they would like to meet, and ask why. For me, that answer is simple: Dorcas Maria Hampton. Born in 1840 in southern Kentucky, she lived a determined life. She didn't fight in the Civil War or make discoveries that altered the course of humanity. Instead, she overcame obstacles. Dorcas Hampton was able to gain financial independence during the 20th century without the assistance of a husband. She didn't leave behind a life story when she died in 1927, but she did leave behind clues that I have been able to research and piece together in order to assemble the story of her life. So what would I ask Dorcas Hampton if I could meet her for just 1 hour or one day? History focuses on the generals who lead the soldiers and the duration of the battles, but it is rare that the minutiae of everyday life is included in the reflection upon life's most notable moments. I would ask her what I don't already know. What was your day-to-day life like during the years of the Civil War? What modes of transportation did you utilize? What were your fears? What did you eat? Where did you live? And how did the fighting and conflict affect you? My second suggestion for the life story writing is to steer clear of the obvious. 25 years ago, I was compiling a trilogy of family history books, and I kept hearing family members talk of the audio tapes that were recorded before Aunt Augusta died. The tapes were so important to this family that they shipped them to me for transcription. Here's what I heard. Quote, Aunt Augusta, not her real name for obvious reasons. Quote, who are your children and when were they born? Period. Poor Aunt Augusta was on oxygen breathing tube, confined for the most part to the sofa. Sentences were interrupted with coughing, which resulted from her lifetime smoking addiction. The television was on in the background, making her much anticipated words hard to decipher, and the dog's frequent barking was more than a little annoying. So Aunt Augusta struggled to name her children, offering details of when and where each was born. But she didn't have to waste her precious last breaths naming her children. The U.S. Census Department does that for us. It might have been more interesting to hear of her initial reaction to the bombing of Pearl Harbor, or when and where and for whom she cast her first ballot, or how she fed her children during the Great Depression. My third recommendation for life story writing is to tie memories to a time or place in history that others can relate to. For example, I am fascinated by the story of the sinking of the ill-fated paddle-wheel steamer Evening Star off the Atlantic seaboard on October 3, 1866. Aboard the sinking ship were Civil War veterans, circus performers, a full French opera, a ballet troupe, and a number, estimated from 25 to 95, of ladies of the evening en route from New York to houses of ill fame in New Orleans. At the time of the ship's sinking, Doris Hampton, also known as Madame Maria Shaw, was engaged in the business that flourished in post-Civil War New Orleans. She wasn't aboard the ship that sank, but I wonder how the loss of 261 people, including a large number of her contemporaries, affected her. It would be interesting to hear her perspective on what was, at the time, the biggest marine disaster in America's history. Suggestion number 4, a timeline. In 1981, right after Ronald Reagan was sworn in as president, my daughter Katie was born. American hostages were being held in Iraq, and when Jimmy Carter left the Oval Office, the hostages were released. For the first 8 years of her life, Ronald Reagan was president. Ironically, she named her daughter Reagan. January 28, 1986. Where were you when the much heralded Space Shuttle Challenger exploded, killing Christa McAuliffe, the first teacher in space? I was at the Courier Post, and the photographer, Rob Hill, kept a radio playing in the dark room. We all gathered around the small, dark space and silently listened together to the first moments of the live coverage. We didn't have a television in the building, and there was no internet to broadcast the news. Within a few moments, up-to-the-minute alerts were sent out over the Associated Press, and we went back to work, reporting the news. But for those few memorable moments, time stood still. Suggestion number 6. If you are writing a life story for someone else, do your homework. Take the time to add details of what was happening in history. Information is so readily available on the internet that this step is fairly simple. If the person you interviewed worked at one of Hannibal's shoe factories, find out which one. Were they making boots for the soldiers, shoes for the children? Until the turn of the 20th century, shoes were made by cobblers. Mass production began in the early 1900s. Were their children born at home or at a hospital? Who was the doctor? Or did they have a midwife? Who were their most memorable teachers, best friends? Did they leave school to help support their families? If they bought groceries, ask where. Recently, after interviewing Walt Chandler about his lifelong music skills, I checked the city directories online and discovered that his father and grandfather operated a grocery store on Chestnut Street. When I asked him about that, he told me a priceless story rich with animation and details of how his grandfather aged cheese for a neighbor, a 2-year process. That story is now preserved for posterity. Suggestion 7. Once complete, put the written life story where it won't be lost or tossed. Don't trust the internet to preserve memories. It is far beyond my comprehension where the internet archives will be in 10 or 100 years. My brain, educated with handwriting and typewritten newspapers and books tells me that ink on paper prevails. The writing I want preserved is neatly posted in my personal scrapbook, built with archival paper, ink, and fasteners. Finally, the eighth and most important suggestion for life story writing is to pick up a pen and begin. Don't use a pencil because it will fade over the years. Remember, you can't finish something unless you first start the project. This is Mary Lou Montgomery. Thanks for watching. Visit my website at www.maryloumontgomery.com.